In a remote, isolated village in India, not far from the settlement, there lay an old tunnel dating back to the British colonial era. Nobody knew exactly why it had been sealed off, but it had remained closed for over 100 years. At the entrance of the tunnel, there was a stone tablet inscribed with a grim history. Back in 1857, during the uprising against British colonial rule, a British army colonel and his men had been trapped inside this very tunnel. Years later, with development pressing forward, the government planned to build a highway cutting right through the village. To save costs, they decided to reopen the long-forgotten tunnel. However, as soon as construction began, the local villagers rose up in fierce opposition. In response to the villagers' defiance, the government teamed up with unscrupulous developers and sent in a heavily armed riot squad to suppress the protests. But the warnings and threats from the riot police only fueled the villagers' resolve, turning their peaceful resistance into an even more intense fight. Despite their courage, standing up against a fully equipped riot squad was like throwing stones at a fortress. Most of the villagers were quickly arrested. Yet, standing firm at the tunnel's entrance was the village's revered shamaness, a figure of great respect and authority. Alongside her, a small group of villagers armed with old muskets prepared to make their last stand, refusing to let the sacred site fall without a fight. Seeing the villagers armed with old muskets, the riot squad immediately tensed up, but the shamaness had no intention of fighting. She only wanted to stop them from opening the tunnel. The riot police, however, refused to listen. They ordered the villagers to lay down their weapons immediately. When the villagers didn't comply, the developer's boss grew impatient, urging the commanding officer to give the order to open fire. Following the command, the riot squad members quickly switched off their body cameras. Yet, facing only ordinary villagers, the soldiers hesitated. They simply couldn't bring themselves to shoot. The standoff dragged on, and it was clear nothing would be resolved peacefully. The developer's boss signaled his assistant with a subtle nod. Understanding the silent command, the assistant sneaked into his bag and pulled out a detonator. Suddenly, an explosion erupted behind the riot squad. Mistakenly believing the villagers had triggered the blast, the soldiers instantly opened fire. In that split second, every villager was struck down, including the revered shamaness. Only one couple, hiding nearby, managed to survive the massacre, but even their luck ran out when the riot squad captured them shortly afterward. Meanwhile, under the developer's pressure, the construction crew used excavators to break open the long-sealed tunnel that had been closed for over a century. The workers immediately entered the tunnel to begin their work, but it wasn't long before the assistant noticed something was wrong. The walkie-talkies lost contact with the crew inside. No matter how loudly he called, there was no response. After a tense wait, a faint light appeared deep inside the tunnel. A worker staggered out, but what shocked everyone was what he was holding: his own entrails, clutched tightly in his hands. The commander, seeing this horrifying scene, immediately radioed for backup. The deputy commander, Sirahi, left one guard to watch over the captured couple and rushed to join the main group. The commander decided to lead a team personally into the tunnel to investigate, while Sirahi stayed behind to protect the developer's family. Equipped with night vision goggles and high alert, the team cautiously entered the tunnel. The cameras on their bodies streamed live footage to the outside, allowing others to see what was happening inside. Soon, they found abandoned safety helmets scattered on the ground, but no sign of the other workers. Not a single body was in sight. The only clue was a British flag lying on the floor, confirming that, just as the stone tablet said, British soldiers had once occupied this tunnel. But then, something terrifying happened. Suddenly, a strange figure dressed in a British soldier's uniform appeared up ahead. As the team prepared to approach and investigate, their cameras began to experience some kind of interference. A chaotic burst of gunfire and agonized screams erupted, and then the footage completely cut out. Contact with the team was lost once again. Just as everyone was trying to catch their breath, two badly injured soldiers stumbled out of the tunnel. But there was no sign of the commander among them. Seeing that their comrades were too wounded to explain what had happened, Deputy Commander Sirahi decided to take a risk and go in to rescue the missing leader. He planned to go alone, but a fearless rookie volunteered to join him. The two quickly disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. After searching for a while, they managed to find the commander lying on the ground deep inside the tunnel. He appeared unharmed, but was staring fixedly at something above. Following the commander's warning, Sirahi shone his flashlight upwards and was horrified to discover something crawling along the ceiling. Seeing this, the two quickly helped the commander to his feet and began running toward the tunnel's exit. Behind them, a pack of unknown creatures chased relentlessly, their terrifying howls echoing through the cavern. The rookie was the first to be attacked. One of the monsters latched onto his thigh, biting down hard, and his screams filled the tunnel. Luckily, Sirahi quickly set the commander down and fired several rounds, managing to free the rookie from the creature's jaws. With the creatures closing in fast, Sirahi supported both injured men and made a desperate dash for the exit. They finally burst out of the tunnel, shaken but alive. There was no time to linger. Sirahi urgently called for everyone to get away from the area. But to everyone's shock, the monsters suddenly fired muskets at them from behind. Thankfully, their aim was poor and no one was hit. Amidst the gunfire, the group managed to escape back to the village. Planning to leave quickly by car, they found both vehicles mysteriously burned to the ground. Approaching cautiously, they discovered the two villagers who had escaped, while the guards assigned to watch over them lay unconscious on the ground. At Siri's call, one of the guards finally woke up and revealed that the villagers had attacked him when he was off guard, escaping on foot, and had burned the cars to block their pursuit. With the situation growing more dire by the minute, Sirahi quickly pulled out a map and spotted an abandoned military camp nearby, a relic left behind from the British colonial era, hidden just ahead in the woods. The group headed straight there. As they made their way through the dense trees, unaware of the lurking danger, several monsters watched them silently from the shadows. Finally reaching the camp, they found the entrance blocked by a burning torch and the heavy gate firmly locked. Clearly, someone was inside. Desperately, two of them pounded on the door, shouting for help. A woman's voice responded from within. It was one of the villagers who had escaped earlier. She told them they could come inside, but the injured had to stay outside. At that moment, Sirahi's heart dropped as he spotted a large group of monsters dressed in British military uniforms closing in. They raised their muskets once again and opened fire on the riot squad. Tragically, the developer's wife was struck by a bullet. In the midst of the chaos, the female officer made a split-second decision to force the door open. Everyone hurried inside the building, and strangely, the monsters stopped shooting and vanished without a trace. To prevent another attack, the team quickly reinforced the doors and windows and set up cameras in every direction to monitor the outside. While everyone was busy securing the camp, two villagers quietly stole the developer's wife's body. When the little girl realized her mother's body was missing, she broke down into uncontrollable sobs. Seeing the girl so heartbroken, Sirahi began searching the camp for the villagers, knowing they were the only ones around besides the squad. He suspected the villagers had taken the body. Soon enough, Sirahi spotted a torchlit doorway where the two villagers were hiding. But when he approached, they refused to open the door no matter what. Meanwhile, the wounded rookie who had been bitten finally woke up, appearing surprisingly unharmed. However, the commander's condition was far worse. He seemed dazed and kept muttering unintelligible words. Everyone noticed that his hair had mysteriously turned white overnight. With no clear explanation, they could only conclude that the commander had suffered severe psychological trauma from the ordeal. But the other two team members weren't so lucky. Their injuries were too severe, and they soon passed away. Now, the team's top priority was to hold the military camp at all costs. Sirahi called for reinforcements, and all they had to do was survive until dawn and wait for backup to arrive. While one of the soldiers was handling the bodies and preparing to leave, something strange happened. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. When he turned around, the bodies on the ground had vanished into thin air. In the blink of an eye, the two corpses eerily stood right behind him. Hearing the screams, the other soldiers rushed over to find their comrade sitting on the ground, covered in blood, his insides spilled around him. He was already dead. But the resurrected corpses were nowhere to be found. Although the cause of death remained a mystery, the team suspected the villagers had stolen the bodies. So, Sirahi returned to the camp once again, this time preparing to burn down the door with a flamethrower to force his way inside. When the woman learned that two bodies were missing, she grew extremely nervous. To prove their innocence, she opened the door and let Sirahi inside. Sure enough, the bodies were nowhere to be found. Stunned, Sirahi asked the woman, "If it wasn't you, then who took the bodies? Did they somehow get up and walk away on their own?" He was certain she knew more than she was letting on. Seeing Sirahi's panicked expression, the woman couldn't help but tease him. "We warned you not to open the tunnel, but you didn't listen. Now you're scared, huh?" With that, she motioned for her husband and led Sirahi to the body of the boss's wife. What Sirahi saw next only deepened his fear. The corpse's eyes were covered with cloth, and its limbs were pinned to a wooden board with steel nails. Instinctively, Sirahi pointed his gun at the woman, suspecting her of being some kind of twisted corpse torturer. But then she explained, anyone killed or wounded by those creatures became infected and would soon turn into one of them. That was why they didn't allow injured people inside the camp. To stop the bodies from mutating, the only option was to burn them. Since they weren't sure if bullets could prevent the infection, the couple had to take special precautions with the bodies. Still, the woman assured Sirahi that their current location was completely safe. They had lit torches outside and drew a protective line around the camp, grinding salt and ashes into powder and scattering it to keep the monsters away. The reason the zombies hadn't launched an attack was because they feared these protective measures. As long as the torches kept burning and the boundary line remained unbroken, the zombies dared not come close. Hearing the woman's explanation, Sirahi finally understood that the two dead soldiers had already turned into zombies. The most urgent task now was to locate those two zombies and deal with anyone infected. Sirahi immediately sprang into action, carrying a bucket of gasoline to dispose of the recently deceased soldiers' bodies. At first, he hesitated, until the corpse suddenly opened its eyes again. After burning the bodies, Sirahi quickly found the bitten rookie, determined to eliminate him to remove any security risks. He carefully inspected the rookie's wound and confirmed the signs of infection. While trying to comfort the young soldier, he quietly pulled out a syringe from his bag, ready to act. But just as he was about to proceed, another team member caught him in the act. Akbar, the rookie's cousin, unaware of the situation, thought Sirahi had lost his mind. Without hesitation, he punched Sirahi unconscious and then tied him up in the bathtub. Afterwards, Akbar told the rest of the team what had happened. Punia, however, had no idea that her cousin was undergoing a terrifying transformation. Meanwhile, the boss's daughter, lying in bed, suddenly heard noises outside her door. The doorknob was being turned. Thinking it was her father, she called out, but no one answered. When the door finally opened, the girl panicked and quickly hid under her blanket. Peeking out again, she was horrified to see something crawling across the ceiling. It was the two soldiers who had turned into zombies. Terrified, she tried to crawl under the bed for safety, only to run straight into another zombie. Her screams echoed through the room and reached Sirahi's ears. Summoning all his strength, he broke free from his restraints just in time to push the zombie away and save the girl from attack. Clearly shaken and frozen with fear, she stood rooted to the spot. Fortunately, a villager appeared just then, handing Sirahi a metal rod and pushing a wooden crate firmly against the door to block it. Afterwards, the three of them went into the main hall, intending to warn everyone about the zombies inside. But just then, the infected rookie suddenly appeared and accused Sirahi of lying. Realizing the zombie was trying to sow discord, the villagers immediately raised sickles to the rookie's throat. Unexpectedly, Akbar, the rookie's cousin, pointed his gun at the villagers and demanded to know why Sirahi was even associating with them. With no choice, Sirahi revealed everything. How the two dead soldiers had turned into zombies and attacked the little girl, and that the rookie himself was infected and extremely dangerous. Punia decided to check the rookie's pulse, but influenced by his cousin, Akbar refused stubbornly. As tensions rose, the villagers seized the moment and threw a special powder onto the rookie. Sure enough, the powder, known as a zombie deterrent, began to rot the rookie's face, revealing his true monstrous form. Without hesitation, he lunged at an unlucky villager nearby, biting a chunk out of his face. Seeing this, everyone rushed forward to restrain the rookie. With the truth undeniable, even Akbar was forced to believe Sirahi's words. But just as one crisis seemed to pass, another quickly followed. With deafening thunder booming overhead, a heavy rain suddenly poured down, extinguishing the torches outside and washing away the protective line drawn on the ground. The villagers immediately sensed that things had taken a turn for the worse. Without the flames and the line to keep the zombies at bay, their safety was gone. Sure enough, in the next moment, the long-absent horde of zombies reappeared. Strangely, though, they still didn't launch an attack. Meanwhile, the team member who had been bitten by the rookie began to mutate. They had no time to worry about the zombies outside. Their immediate concern was the undead inside the building. The newly transformed team member, along with the two trapped zombies, were all burned to ashes with gasoline. The infected rookie, however, was tied up because, unlike the others, he had somehow retained the ability to speak. The group began to interrogate the rookie, and from him, they finally learned the origin of the zombies. It turned out that the zombies outside were none other than the British colonel and his troops who had been trapped inside the tunnel over 100 years ago. The tunnel had originally been built by these soldiers, but they were besieged and buried alive by the Indian rebels during their uprising, turning the tunnel into their tomb. But the colonel refused to accept his fate. A devoted practitioner of dark magic, he summoned an evil mountain deity using forbidden rituals, and even sacrificed his own son to gain the deity's power. The result was chilling. The colonel obtained the dark powers he sought and transformed his troops into an undead zombie army. Nearby villagers had also been offering fresh animal blood to appease this evil deity for years. Yet not long ago, when the village shaman led a sacrificial ritual, she touched the deity's statue and saw a terrifying vision, the undead army being unleashed. This was why the villagers fiercely opposed the reopening of the tunnel. After learning the full story, Sirahi pressed the infected rookie for the colonel's true motive. But the rookie demanded they hand over the little girl, claiming it was the only way to save their lives. Sirahi, however, refused outright. They had already made irreversible mistakes. There was no way to keep making them. Meanwhile, back at the military camp, the boss discovered an old diary left behind by the colonel. Inside, there were chilling details about the evil deity. Anyone who wielded its power was cursed to be trapped forever in the mountains. The only way to gain freedom was through a ritual sacrifice. A young girl had to be offered at the deity's shrine. No wonder the infected rookie demanded they hand over the little girl. This also explained why the zombies outside remained motionless. They were biding their time, waiting for the right moment to capture her alive for the sacrifice. Then the boss glanced over at the commander and suddenly understood. The girl's eyes widened in terror as she noticed a horrifying shadow forming on the commander's back. The shape was unmistakable. It was the colonel himself. It became clear that the commander had long been possessed by the colonel's spirit. Terrified, the girl scrambled away from her seat, and her father quickly followed. When others rushed over, they were stunned to see the once unconscious commander suddenly regain clarity. But the first words he spoke chilled everyone to the bone. He demanded they hand over the little girl to save their own lives. At that moment, the zombie horde outside began to stir, as if ready to launch a full-scale attack any second. Despite the looming threat, no one agreed to sacrifice the little girl. Still shaken from what she had witnessed, the girl confided everything to her father. He quickly pulled out a photo of the colonel and asked if the man she saw matched the one in the picture. When she confirmed, his eyes lit up with a strange excitement, but he didn't intend to share this with the others. It seemed he had his own secret plan. The girl couldn't understand her father's behavior and insisted that they needed to tell everyone. But instead of listening, her father harshly scolded her. Though young, the girl knew right from wrong and saw clearly that her father had always been selfish. She accused him of being responsible for everything that had happened. Even the deliberate detonation that caused the riot police to open fire on the villagers was something she had witnessed. Furious and losing control, the father immediately turned violent, beating his own daughter mercilessly. Luckily, the villagers arrived just in time and rescued her. To prevent the girl from falling into the colonel's hands, they decided to quickly sneak her out through the back door. But as soon as Sarpanch opened the door, he was ambushed by zombies waiting outside. Sirahi happened to arrive at that moment and managed to pull Sarpanch away from the clutches of the zombies. With the villagers' help, they quickly shut the door again, keeping the undead outside. Unfortunately, Sarpanch had already been bitten, and it was only a matter of time before he would turn. Meanwhile, Punia took the opportunity to bring the girl to the villagers' hidden safe room, the safest place for her at the moment. He warned her not to leave the room or let anyone in, except for himself and Sirahi. The girl trusted Punia completely and revealed everything: her father's role in detonating the bombs and the colonel's possession of the commander's body. In fact, Punia had already suspected something was wrong with the colonel the moment he demanded the girl be handed over, and the girl's confession only confirmed his fears. To prevent the commander from causing more trouble inside, Punia immediately went to the main hall and exposed her true identity. The commander, of course, denied everything, but secretly gave orders to her subordinates to launch an attack. In an instant, a horde of the undead surged toward the military camp, violently battering the doors and windows. The riot police fought desperately, unleashing full firepower on the relentless crowd. Taking advantage of the chaos, the commander slipped away and approached the girl's hiding place, trying to coax her into opening the door. Terrified of the commander, the girl naturally refused to open it. But then, unexpectedly, her father appeared outside the door. Everyone thought he had come to rescue his daughter, but instead, he tried to negotiate a deal with the colonel, using his identity as her father as leverage. Hearing this, the commander retreated into the shadows, and the colonel's true form suddenly appeared behind her. Ever since reading the colonel's diary, the boss had been tempted by the power of the evil god. He believed that with that power, he could do whatever he wanted, gaining unlimited wealth and authority. If the colonel agreed to share some of that power, the boss was willing to offer his own child as a sacrifice. Without hesitation, the colonel accepted the deal. Even though it was her own father knocking at the door, the girl refused to open it, choosing instead to trust Punia's advice. The boss, frustrated and embarrassed by his failure, realized he needed to try a different approach. Meanwhile, the team managed to hold back the first wave of the zombie attack after a fierce struggle. But on the other side, Sarpanch began to show signs of mutation. Without hesitation, his wife took up her sickle and mercifully ended his suffering. Witnessing such decisiveness toward a loved one's transformation, Akbar accepted the harsh reality and said goodbye to his infected cousin. However, the boss had other plans. Desperate to achieve his goals, he secretly tried to open the back door and let the zombies in. Luckily, Punia spotted this on the surveillance and rushed to stop him. But the boss wasn't ready to give up. He attempted to bribe Punia with cash. She stood firm and refused, unaware that the boss had stealthily picked up a crowbar. With that, the boss forced open the back door and unleashed the zombies inside. Punia was overwhelmed immediately. Sirahi was devastated to witness this betrayal, but the zombies surged into the hall in an instant. The team grabbed their weapons and fought desperately to survive. Despite their efforts, the zombies' numbers were overwhelming. One team member was knocked down first, forcing the survivors to retreat to the room where the girl was hiding. The commander still lingered stubbornly at the door, and that iron gate was their last line of defense. Sirahi urgently called for the girl to open the door, but she suddenly heard her mother's voice on the other side, telling her not to open it. It turned out the commander was secretly manipulating things again. Seeing no other choice, Sirahi stepped forward and knocked her out. Inside the room, the girl's mother had already broken free from her restraints. The villagers' defenses hadn't been enough to hold back her zombified form. Terrified by the horrifying sight of her mother, the girl quickly opened the door. As Sirahi and the others dragged the unconscious commander inside, the horde of zombies immediately surged forward. They slammed the door shut and locked it tight, then hurriedly pulled the girl's mother away from her and dragged her behind a curtain where they ended her suffering on the spot. The door was solid, and for the moment, they were safe, but it also meant they were trapped inside. Just then, the commander regained consciousness. Sirahi knew she had only been possessed and hadn't really harmed anyone, but for safety's sake, he had no choice but to tie her up with a rope. Suddenly, a desperate plea for help came through the radio. Akbar and some villagers were trapped in another room, surrounded by zombies. The iron door they were behind wouldn't hold for much longer, so they begged Sirahi for rescue. On the surface, Sirahi agreed, but deep down he was preparing not to help. After all, they were barely holding on themselves. Unexpectedly, the boss's assistant spoke up with an idea. He'd spotted a cannon in the room along with some unused gunpowder. Being a skilled demolitions expert, he was confident he could craft a powerful shell using the supplies at hand to take out the zombies. The assistant mixed a large amount of gunpowder with nails, packed it tightly into the cannon barrel with a stick, and quickly fashioned a devastating weapon. Together, they aimed the cannon at the main door, then boldly flung the door open, letting the zombies pour in. Caught off guard, the zombies hesitated, unsure how to react as they shuffled inside. Sensing the perfect moment, Sirahi decisively lit the fuse. The power of that cannonball was truly extraordinary. In an instant, it wiped out all the zombies nearby. Without hesitation, they left the commander locked inside the building to fend for himself and rushed to rescue the other two trapped team members. Sirahi unleashed a barrage of gunfire, clearing the entrance of zombies, and finally, the 5 of them regrouped. Despite the relentless waves of zombies still pouring in, Sirahi didn't rush to flee. He knew they had to confront the colonel once and for all. Even if the colonel couldn't capture the little girl, he would find other victims for the sacrifice. If the ritual was completed and the colonel escaped the mountain, it would mean devastation across all of India. The others were determined to join Sirahi in this final battle. But first, they had to come up with a flawless plan. Guided by the villagers, the group headed to the village pond, the very site where the villagers had been offering sacrifices to the dark god. Under a wooden plank, they discovered several bundles of explosives. These bombs were originally intended as a last resort against the demolition crews, but they had never gotten the chance to use them. Their plan was to hide the bombs inside a doll and use it as a trap to blow up the colonel. It was a risky and somewhat desperate plan, but given the circumstances, they had no better option. Before they could put the plan into action, a voice crackled over the radio. It was the advance rescue team. They had just arrived near the village. Just as Sirahi was about to warn the team about the danger and tell them to stop advancing, the radio suddenly lost signal for no apparent reason. With no way to communicate, they had no choice but to split up. Sirahi, the assistant, and the little girl followed the plan to head into the tunnel and set off explosives to kill the colonel. Meanwhile, The villagers and Akbar went to pick up the two soldiers. Fortunately, the two soldiers were unharmed and standing where they had left off, seemingly untouched by the zombie horde. But in the next moment, disaster struck. The zombies launched a sudden attack, dragging one soldier under a vehicle. When the other soldier reached out to help, he too was knocked to the ground and eventually fell victim to the zombies. The unlucky pair became zombie food. As more zombies swarmed in, the survivors had no choice but to retreat into a vehicle, which quickly became surrounded and trapped by the relentless horde. At the same time, the trio preparing the bomb in the dining hall also faced danger. The assistant had stepped outside briefly to wrap the doll in some clothes, only to be caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the commander. The commander then stormed into the shrine and lunged at the little girl. Seeing this, Sirahi didn't hesitate. He shot the commander in the thigh. At this point, he was done holding back, ready to take the commander out with a fatal shot to end the threat once and for all. But he had underestimated the colonel's powers. A single look from the commander was enough to confuse and manipulate Sirahi's mind instantly. The next moment, as if summoned by some unseen force, the zombie horde suddenly ceased their attack and began to retreat. Taking advantage of the lull, the villagers quickly grabbed the keys and drove the vehicle back to the shrine. When they arrived, only the commander remained at the scene. It turned out that the colonel had already left the commander's body and instead possessed Sirahi. Meanwhile, the little girl had been taken away with them. The commander believed all of this was her fault, and in a moment of despair, both of them put guns to their own heads. Learning that the little girl was taken to the tunnel, the group immediately rushed there by car. But at that moment, the possessed Sirahi was dragging the girl inside against her will. Amid her heart-wrenching screams for help, he brought her to the sacrificial altar dedicated to the dark deity. There, the girl saw her father locked inside a cage, clutching a bundle of explosives in his hands. It turned out that after releasing the zombies into the military camp, he had come to the tunnel to strike his deal with the colonel. To prevent the colonel from backing out, he had brought the explosives as leverage. But instead of gaining the dark god's power, he was trapped in the cage, a prisoner of his own desperate bargain. The girl desperately tried to call out to her father for help, but he was already lost to madness. Sirahi pressed the girl down onto the altar, holding a dagger to her throat. The girl kept calling out, "Uncle Sirahi," hoping to awaken his true self. Her pleas worked. With a tremendous effort of will, Sirahi wrested control of his body back from the colonel. He reassured the girl that he wouldn't harm her, but the colonel revealed his true form, grabbing Sirahi's hand and attempting to force the sacrifice. In a split second, Sirahi summoned every ounce of strength, stabbing the dagger into the colonel's face, then pulling out his gun and firing wildly until the colonel fell to the ground. At the same time, the villagers and Akbar burst into the tunnel in their vehicle. But the colonel wasn't so easily defeated. He sprang back to his feet and sank his teeth into Sirahi's neck. Outside, the zombies swarmed in, knocking Sirahi down and savagely tearing at him. In his final moments, Sirahi remembered the explosives tied to the girl's father and shouted for the girl to detonate them immediately. The girl found the remote in her bag, but stood frozen, unable to press the button. Though her father was far from perfect, he was still the one who had given her life, and she struggled to bring herself to act. The girl only made her decision after seeing Sirahi go completely still under the zombie's savage attack. With a heavy heart, she finally pressed the detonator. Meanwhile, Akbar and the others were driving deeper into the tunnel when suddenly a massive explosion echoed ahead. Every zombie collapsed, convulsing wildly. It was clear the colonel had finally been defeated. As the smoke slowly cleared, the girl appeared, having triggered the bomb at last. The three survivors raced out of the tunnel by car, and dawn was breaking. They thought the nightmare was over. But just as Akbar used the radio to call headquarters, a desperate soldier's cry for help came through the static. Frantically, the girl flipped through the colonel's diary and read the chilling final entries. Over 100 years ago, those who died became cursed by the evil god and transformed into zombies. At that moment, all of India was under attack. A reporter was broadcasting live by the sea when a deafening roar shattered the air. Countless ancient ships appeared on the horizon, flying British flags. The former colonizers had returned as a terrifying undead army.